So, a little bit about our presenter today, Dr. Barratt, lecturer and head at the IGDS UE St. Augustine campus. Dr. Barratt is a scholar of human communication and gendered expression and interaction. She interrogates gender based violence, especially as it manifests through social discourse. In addition, she explores the nuance and significance of social identities, such as race and ethnicity, for example, through her most recent book, Dogla in the 21st Century, Adding to the Mix. In general, Dr. Barrett's research extends to human communication conflict, gender based violence and child sexual abuse, social media use and its implications, mental health management and its implications for learners, gender and climate adaptation and resilience, and carnival and cultural studies. She is dedicated to building gender responsiveness and gender justice within society. Welcome, Dr. Barrett. The floor is all yours.
Thank you very much, Lizady. It's a pleasure to be here today, and thank you very much, everyone, for coming. I think we'll have an intimate conversation while I share a little bit with you about the work that I've done around masculinity and motivation for carnival participation. You will see that I will refer to two computers because my desktop at work has some sound and camera problems. So I'm speaking to you through the laptop. So for now, I'll just share my screen for us to begin. This presentation is a chapter excerpt taken from an edited collection with my co-editor, Mr. Nikolai Attai. And the edited collection has multiple authors. I believe it's about 8 or 9 chapters in all, under the theme or title, Free Up Yourself, Transgressive Bodies and Contestations in the Carnivalesque. So I'll give you a little bit summary of that and then jump into my chapter, which is focusing on masculinity and masculine motivations. And so we enter into the conversation of the transgressive and the carnivalesque.
So, a little bit about our presenter today, Dr. Barrett, lecturer and head at the IGDS UE St. Augustine campus. Dr. Barrett is a scholar of human communication and gendered expression and interaction. She interrogates gender based violence, especially as it manifests through social discourse. In addition, she explores the nuance and significance of social identities, such as race and ethnicity, for example, through her most recent book, Dogla in the 21st Century, Adding to the Mix. In general, Dr. Barrett's research extends to human communication conflict, gender based violence and child sexual abuse, social media use and its implications, mental health management and its implications for learners, gender and climate adaptation and resilience, and carnival and cultural studies. She is dedicated to building gender responsiveness and gender justice within society. Welcome, Dr. Barrett. The floor is all yours.
Thank you very much, Lizady. It's a pleasure to be here today, and thank you very much, everyone, for coming. I think we'll have an intimate conversation while I share a little bit with you about the work that I've done around masculinity and motivation for carnival participation. You will see that I will refer to two computers because my desktop at work has some sound and camera problems. So I'm speaking to you through the laptop. So for now, I'll just share my screen for us to begin and take you through the presentation. And then again, we can have an open discussion. So as I was saying before, this presentation is a chapter excerpt. It is, the volume is low. Oh, can you hear me better now? Okay, I think the computer was a little bit away from me. All right. So this presentation is a chapter excerpt taken from an edited collection with my co-editor, Mr. Nikolai Attai. And the edited collection has multiple authors. I believe it's about 8 or 9 chapters in all, under the theme or title, Free Up Yourself, Transgressive Bodies and Contestations in the Carnivalesque. So I'll give you a little bit summary of that and then jump into my chapter, which is focusing on masculinity and masculine motivations. And so we enter into the conversation of the transgressive and the carnivalesque through this assertion by our male masqueraders: nothing else matters. Men then operate their transgressive self. They express their transgressive self. They assert their transgressive self in the Trinidad Carnival space. And there are many ways to be transgressive, so I hope you're interested and find this transgression to be valid. So this is just an overview, but we will jump over that because I want to take a musical interlude. It is 11 days before the 2025 masquerade, and these men were interviewed during the masquerade. Nothing Else Matters and Ultimate Rejects a 2027 production and road march summarizes, it starts us off where we will end in terms of my presentation to you. So take a moment and enjoy Ultimate Rejects Full Extreme. You might be familiar with this song.
Boom. You are so make way for the you make way for the R. Tell them I'm feeling good, like a new machine, like morning dew, fresh on the scene. I make a party to the full extreme, and light it up with gasoline. Oh Lord, the city could burn down. We jamming still, we jamming still. The building could fall down. We jamming still, we jamming. Just hold them and walk there, hold them and walk there, hold them and walk there, hold them and walk there. Just hold them and walk there, hold them and walk there, hold them and walk there, hold them and walk there. No, we don't business. Oh, no, we don't business. We get on like you don't business. We get on like you don't business. Free up like you don't business. Free up like you don't business. Oh, no, we don't business. Oh, no, we don't business.
I would have loved to continue with it throughout the whole 3 minutes of the song, but we don't have all day, and you could continue to listen. Now that song, we don't business, we partying, we're freeing up, we're abandoning, we are at the full extreme, which is so characteristic of the features and functions of the Jamaica Carnival, that is Trinidad and Tobago Carnival, summarizes in soca, which has the capacity to imprint within its text so much of the general view of the people who participate, Carnival being a participant observer sport, if I can put it that way. So with that musical segue, just a little bit of the music, we take a look at the male masquerader. And we begin first by just setting the stage, as I had highlighted at the very beginning, to the collection, excuse me. In the collection that I mentioned, which is where this chapter fits, we are collectively exploring and theorizing what it means to embody and be empowered by the chaos of transgression. Unlike any other space, Carnival allows for transgression, and then Ash Wednesday comes, right? We evaluate the implications for people, all kinds of people, all the authors doing it from different angles. I'm doing it from the perspective of men who destabilize the region's dominant gender and sexual politics. We examine how people actively utilize what we are conceptualizing as the carnivalesque. You might have heard me mention it at the beginning and say, what is this carnivalesque? Well, we're really applying or deploying Bakhtin's concept to refer to spaces of festivity and places of excitement, the extraordinary, the ritualistic. People are preparing now, and every radio station is counting down this ritual of fetes and cultural events and performances and competition that culminates in the hot sun parade. And this is done to confront, negotiate, disrupt, and transgress what is normative trends. Normative being it has become so common, we think it is concretized, but it doesn't really rest in concrete reality. So how it is people are contending with these unconcrete concreteness? How are we blurring boundaries? How are we breaking boundaries? And how then are we contending with perspectives in the Caribbean as well as in Caribbean diasporas? So we have people who are writing about Carnival in Canada, in the United Kingdom, in Jamaica, in Grenada, and in Trinidad and Tobago. I think I'm forgetting a country, but that's just by way of summary. Now we get to what I am trying to say to you. I am exploring and look at the pictures. These pictures are not my own. I borrowed it from Google and just using it for illustrative purposes. And of course, the citation should be there. But they are borrowed to illustrate men in Carnival and some of the feelings that they share and some of the motivations they express, which of course is the focus we're dealing with today. I explore how the male masquerader defines self in place while they were masquerading, while they were having fun, while they were getting sweaty. We then explored their feelings. So it was a visceral response. And we looked at that through their explanations of their motivations for participation in the masquerade in particular. And I also evaluated how they then asserted a transgressive self as possible in this space called the Trinidad Carnival Masquerade. And what I can summarize to say to you is that their expression of their transgression reflected a duelling. It's not pure, it's a duelling with Caribbean masculine ideology, hypermasculine ideologies, especially reputation and responsibility. And for those of you who are unfamiliar, scholars have established that while we do not have a definition of masculinity, we do have an expectation of masculine ideals, characteristics, notions that say what masculinity is. And it is rooted in reputation and responsibility, and connected to that, provider or breadwinner role, as well as high sexual prowess and procreative capacity. So reputation and responsibility is at once, they are citing their compliance to the ideals of this, but then they are asserting a resistance to the ideal of this. So they are dueling with masculine ideals, which we will see quite common if you ever look at things related to gender. So just to set the stage, why did I even start to do this? Did I just want to see how men transgress in the road and their motivations for playing math? There was a larger issue, because in studying Carnival, I've also studied women in Carnival, the paradox of femininity, their participation, what motivates them as a commercial entity, and of course, soca music. And so, because women are so ubiquitous, right? And I mean, every tourist line says, woman, Carnival is woman. Much accounting of the female masqueraders' presence has been given, both in literature and popular culture. And that experience, though, reflects much insecurity as it reflects enjoyment. So this insecurity is reported as a persistent experience which comes from their encounters with men. And so some of the security we see in bands and on the road and the group trends in how women play math are attached to their encounters to men. And so we all have cultural intelligence around what may occur in the masquerade, but we need to understand it without presuming. So I thought it necessary to turn attention to the male presence, which has received less reporting, to see what poses a threat. Why? What in the things that are presumed, the things that are asserted, the motivations I explained, what presume this threat that are so often reported by women, and how can we expand our perspective? So the scope of this particular study for this chapter within this collection then takes a particular focus. I explore how the masquerader, that is the male masquerader, confronts power structures that can predetermine and reproduce the expression of self in space and place. Remember, we said we're looking at the transgressive. I looked at the perspectives of men interviewed during 2 years of the masquerade. So it was 2017, 2018. I'll summarize the methodology in a minute. And I look at expressions of gender as a central part of self. Because we are, remember, we are looking at masculine and feminine as relational ideas, relational entities themselves. And the problem statement started with the experiences of women, and now we're trying to understand the experiences of men to try to then build justice for all. And even those who do not identify as men or women, or masculine purely or feminine purely, all inclusive gender justice. What is the relevance? We want to understand. So we don't just want to explore, we want to understand the male masqueraders' motivations for participation, the connection of these to the experience of threat, as I already explained, how the boundaries of hegemonic masculinity can be contested by men, because there are many ways of being masculine, but the hegemonic dominates, and how they can be contended by men through their own testimony of their transgressive acts, and their transgressive acts in an extraordinary space, i.e. the carnivalesque. So we had questions which were questions for data collection, but also operated as research questions. Very simple, straightforward. For those visceral responses, on-the-spot responses. What is your reason for playing mass? Why do you play mass? What is fun for you? And that last question emerged from preliminary work that happened the year prior, where we were just talking loosely as we started to contemplate this study. And a lot of people was like, I just want to have fun. I want to have fun with the buddies. I want to have fun with women. I want to have fun in general. And so we decided to expand it by asking the question. So what was the methodology in summary? I did a convenient sample of men who were participating in 2017 and 2018 Carnival Tuesday Masquerade. We had a total of 100 men who responded to us over the 2 years, 45 in 2017 and 55 in 2018. And I used 2 young male interviewers to assist me so that there would be peer-to-peer engagement, and so that the men could feel comfortable saying what they needed to say to a fellow person who they perceived as a man as well. I did quantitative content analysis where I measured the frequency of themes in a talk. So how many times people said something, not so much prominence, but this is something that keeps reoccurring across the 100 men as they explain themselves. And then I did qualitative content analysis on those frequently emerging themes, evaluating the meanings at the level of the word and the phrase, with some reference to this larger discourses, which I won't elaborate too much because I don't want to take up too much of the time just reading, theoretical text. But definitely, what does it mean at the level of the word? And so with that methodology in place, I'm able to summarize before I get into actual pieces of their talk and read a little bit for you what things mean, those meanings that I suggest exist and that frequency that I highlighted. Here's what happened. Here's what the men say. Here's what the talk revealed. The carnival space is a space of gendered transgression for men, as it has been for women. And women, of course, have long breached the bounds of femininity, respectability, and containment. And so we see men also breaching the bounds of masculinity in terms of reputation and respect and breadwinner and so forth. At the same time, there's a sense of dissonance, as these men are also rooted in established ideals of Caribbean masculinity, which is hard to escape. They appear to transgress within conformity. So though we still have the hypermasculine box, they then practice that transgression inside of there. They experience freedom while they express restriction. Freedom, but there are some containment around that freedom. The reminder is that transgression is not pure or exclusive. And remember, I'm speaking in the context of the collection. It is not a pure nor exclusive experience. It's always contentious. But they assert unapologetically, nothing else matters, suggesting an all or nothing understanding of the potential for the space. But the details of their talk also express this containment in what I'm suggesting to be qualified freedom. So let's think a little bit about what I am talking about by looking at 3 motivations. I've just presented to you on the screen 2 quotes from the masqueraders. They will come up as I read, but just so you have an idea of some of the clinching perspectives. This is just a sample. So we begin. Among the different reasons given by men for participating is, of course, the presence of the female masquerader and other women in the space. This has some more significant frequency, whether stated in the singular that they want to see woman, 37 times saying this of the 100, or plural, I come for women, 29 times across all of the responses. There is no doubt that the male masquerader is motivated to participate by the presence of their female counterparts and their presumption of access to them. Now, this is important for the starting problematic, but we're focusing on the freedom and carnivalesque. I'm not going to elaborate too much on the GBV side of it, okay? But if you want to know more, I can answer those questions and explore and elaborate that connection. So we have two presumptions in their responses, which emerged as they explain their motivations, right? One is that there's a tendency to kind of specific, concise assertion of the word woman. It's not taken for granted. What else do you think I'm here for? In other words, right? And I could switch to Creole. And then the second trend is a tendency to state what they expect. They're coming out on the road and they have a plan. So they want to settle up on a bumsy, wine and a bumsy, grab a wine, and I'll elaborate from their own words what they mean or what they desire. So these gentlemen, for example, one masquerader, along with what you have on the screen, one masquerader said, "What your SC? Look at all the women there. Watch all of them." Them being the ladies that dominate the space in the majority, right? It's only ladies, he says to the interviewer, like, "You're blind what?" Another masquerader who offered an elaborated response outlining his expected behavior also drew the interviewer into his reasoning in the space. He said, "All that woman, you ain't gonna play mass." So you see how he's almost saying this is a logical foregone conclusion for me as a masquerader. Another is more direct, stating at the end of his own elaboration, obviously, because of the women in the band. Male masqueraders, they also establish the legitimacy of this reasoning. They don't leave it alone. They explain by qualifying their responses. But this is where you see some of that duelling. And stay with me as I talk about the text, how we see them dueling with the meanings that they're asserting. That's what they did. Now, when they use phrases such as, "Well, to be honest with you," they hedge. And that hedging signals that what follows in the phrase is seen as true for the speaker, but they're trying to be polite. So further hedging occurs when they say, "Well, though, you know," because they're trying to say to you, "Well, I'm telling you the truth, but I really want to sound too obviously, you know, this is my motivation. There are moral concerns about masculine and feminine relations." So it may be read as an attempt to more politely state the singularly relevant, but in their tone, which I cannot encode because I'm not playing their voice, it is an indicator of their conclusion about their motivation, women. They then qualify what they see as plausible about their response. They say, "Well, probably, the women mainly, mostly, most men, I saying to you, most men, they come here to play mass for women." So they're like, there's plausibility in my argument, even if I don't only refer to myself, I'm making the assumption for my fellow male masqueraders. Now, what is most significant is how one masquerader, and there's on the left of the screen, he's a 48-year-old with 13 years of experience at the time. He draws out the implication of competitive patriarchy. And here I'm throwing in some concepts without outlining the conceptual framework. He said, he sees a comparative advantage of less men in the space to compete in the pursuit of presumably available women who men love and could hold down or secure for themselves with little thought for how the women might choose in the situation. Going back to that problematic. So as he says, well, to be honest, they say carnival is woman, right? Now we know carnival is woman, but man also love woman, right? And you will see, like, let me just say, out of a section of 6 women in a section, you will see about 5 men. So you know why? Because they tell themselves, well, you're here. What happened is 20 to 1. So if it's 5 of we alone, I could hold on 20. That's really it. Basically, men does really play carnival because obviously the women in the band. Now, within this, we see some gendered performance. There's a sense of entitlement of access to women. Who tell you when you go in the band how you could hold on 20, right? That's what I mean. It is a patriarchal assumption. Remember, they're dueling with hegemonic masculinity and a tendency of Caribbean heteronormative masculinity, i.e. heterosexual, hegemonic, and normative. It is evident in their explanations of their expected behavior. They speak with intent and set aside the need for the women's uncoerced consent. They are presuming it to mutually engage in hypersexual action or hedonistic action, which is a feature of Trinidad Carnival. So they say, I go take a little wine. I ask him for it. They tend to give in, they say, women tend to give in. In addition, they center their own action. I could hold on when I whine. You go jump up and enjoy yourself, most important. They express their desire. I look in, I see in, I want to flex. And an intention to pursue. I come out to find, to meet, to attract. These are the words of other masqueraders. So the male masquerader's participation is not passive. It is actively in pursuit of many things: culture, ritual, enjoyment, freedom. But among these, engagement with women is most prominent. But here's where the transgression coming in terms of their first motivation. Within this conformity to hegemonic masculinity, we then have another masquerader, a 30-year-old with 3 years experience. You'll see that on the screen, explaining something to us. That is the notion of boundaries around social identities, be it class, be it gender, be it race, and so forth. So he brings up the larger debates that have occurred around carnival and carnival participation and belonging and recognition. He talks about the girls from the bank, which is an old trope in our country, who watch me like they don't know me when carnival done. When the masquerade is over, he says. He also cites his actions against prescribed feminine beauty ideals. He said, I don't discriminate, you know. I don't discriminate on your sex, your size, your shape. And if we read the quote, the reason why I, as a man, come out to play mass strictly for the woman, they come out to enjoy themselves, so I strictly come out for the fun with the ladies. I don't discriminate on your sex, your size, your shape. These are very political and troubling ideas in Trinidad Carnival. That's not a problem to me, he asserts. It's just carnival, because when I wang on the girls from the bank Monday and Tuesday, Wednesday, please the Lord, if I tell them good morning, they just watch me like they don't know me. So I just come out strictly for the fun. And so here it is. While this masquerade is not transgressing hegemonic Caribbean masculine ideals, he is transgressing those intersectional social ideals and norms that influence how people can participate, how people can belong, how people can view themselves in the masquerade, which is a most valued perspective. Their claim to a larger transgressive potential stands out then. That is the eschewing of limits of boundaries. The utterance then of nothing else matters comes up through the motivation, which is freedom. 12, Leslie, how much more time do I have? Just checking in.
You can go until 1:45.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yep.
So we move into freedom. And freedom then get taken us closer to the ultimate connection. And you see some of the quotes from the different masqueraders on the screen, just to keep you with me as I explain. So what is this freedom? Remember, he breached the boundaries. That's the last masquerader. And then we had other masqueraders asserting their positioning within the hegemonic masculine ideals. They're dueling already. But now we're going to see another take on dueling. Let's go through. So within this group of 100 men who were engaged during the masquerade, multiple speakers referred to the experience of feeling free, or the freedom playing a mask gave them. In fact, the notion of freedom was made relevant 35 times across all responses. Referencing freedom signals, that salience to the experience. It was so ready with multiple explanations for what freedom is. So some people said removal of inhibition. I don't have to be big man thing, man a man, just be like regular fellas or even like proper or whatever it is that masculinity has referred. I can just be myself. I have reckless abandon. So that's why I play full extreme for you. One 31-year-old said, I'm releasing tension, stress, and negativity. That was another popular response. A 30-year-old man, in terms of the explanation of freedom, a 38-year-old man, he's been in the masquerade for 2 years. He said, everybody is free and they're enjoying themselves. No worries in the world. Then another 25-year-old who has been in it for 10 years, he says, I guess in a time in which people unite and we tend to forget all about the hardships of the land and we rejoice as one. We have unity, we have moving away from hardships. We have, of course, freedom to be oneself. When they explain themselves like this, they then encode in their talk the things they come against, the things that occur in the everyday that then does not extend to the extraordinary, which is the carnivalesque. So they now have to deal with hardships, they have to deal with negativity, they have to deal with stress, they have to deal with so many things. And here's this moment where they can transgress the everyday that shapes their lives as men. Another 23-year-old participating for the first time, he said, we studying all the bad things that are going on in the country, yeah? And his 30-year-old peer, who's been in it for 2 years, he said, I free up, I laid back, I release the stress and just have fun. What does this all mean? The explanations on the road, that visceral response, articulate a deviation from the everyday norms to the emancipatory potential of the extraordinary. I just suggested that. And that is true to the Trinidad Carnival space. And it's most relevant to our collection. It's most relevant to understanding the motivations of men. They get a gendered sense of being, which they can then become other to themselves, other to the limits of masculinity, especially if we were to take Sampad's early assertion about how important reputation is for men in the Caribbean. Sampad said at the time, both men and women, but especially men, superficially tout the idea that it is a free society, free for the individual to do as he or she pleases. A strong reputation which emphasizes personal freedom is deemed important in this post-slavery, post-plantation, post-colonial environment. So you see how there's a layered set of ideals that these men are responding to, and they continue. Another set of explanations for their feeling of freedom allude to the confrontation with responsibility. Remember we said masculine ideals also include breadwinner, provider, sexual performance, and procreation, along with reputation and respect. So here's what they said. 131-year-old, second year in the masquerade, he said, is work and school, I could get away from it. I get freedom. A 51-year-old, 32 years in the masquerade said, because we have the stress of work, of paying bills, of taking care of families, I have a moment of freedom. Another experienced 53-year-old, 30 years in the masquerade said, just relax and free up yourself after working hard for the whole year. And his 32-year-old counterpart, who's been in it for, just 6 years in the road, says, you relax yourself, you know what I mean? Because you're working 24/7, 365 days to keep things together. But it is a 37-year-old masquerader with 19 years experience. He clinched it and he talked about his free pass. It ties us back to the last motivating point. Remember, I said women. So freedom connects, it's not disconnected. But what did our 37-year-old say? I'm a married man. I'm a dedicated father. So these 2 days is my time to play myself. If I squeeze a breast, hold an ass, whine, my wife does not mind, but not on effing Ash Wednesday. So he was very clear that he's claiming a free pass to engage with other women's bodies outside of his marriage, which reflects to some degree and debatable a tolerated male infidelity in Caribbean context. But he then said there's a stopgap. There's a place where I have to return to the ideal notions of my masculine self, even though we have competing ideals in place. So all the men spoke of freedom from work, from productive labor, which is most often income generating. This work is core to the breadwinner role. This patriarchal notion is a long-held ideal, as Barratt found it since in 1998. She said familiar roles of men, defined as father and conjugal partner, are perceived as limited to providing economic support and occasional discipline, and as woefully adequately performed. He takes responsibility for economic support as a productive worker in a public domain. So here it is. And there's more that I can quote, but I don't want to take us too far into the literature. So essentially, we have freedom asserted as a motivation, freedom from not only the limits of hardship and everyday work and the restrictions of the everyday, but freedom from those weights that define who you must be as a man. Freedom from those pressures that define how you must operate in your relationships within the family, within the public sphere, within other place, intentionally transgressive in the carnivalesque. And then finally, we have the summary position, their ultimate motivation. That is, nothing else matters. We pull extreme, we do business. Oh, I don't sing well. So when I'm 31-year-old and I have them on the screen for you, in his second year of the masquerade says, I really don't think it's about anything, it's reckless abandon. Nothing matters for these 2 days are having a good time. Now, I think the trend is that you could start 2 days before the 2 days, but definitely for the masquerade, these are 2 days, you go night and day, and you really get that abandonment. Hedonism, abandonment, freedom, all themes attached to carnival. But for men, it is a similar thematic as it has been for women. And his 51-year-old peer in his 32nd year also says, I don't think about nothing else, but just dancing and having a good time. It is nothing else matters. So this is a clear assertion of the male masquerader's transgressive self, as I've already been explaining as I've been going around. He claims a preoccupation with enjoyment, with the experience of the space and the ritual of carnival, with pleasure through dancing, having a good time and being reckless. We do business, as Ultimate Reject said, and so it became anthemic and the winning road march in 2017. He shifts himself from the bounds of the everyday to the open-endedness of the extraordinary, of the carnivalesque, of the Trinidad and Tobago street parade. Prompted by this assertion of self, though, is the substance of the thing that is abandoned. Stay with me. That is not thought about for the 2 days. This man that nobody defines but holds me to and expects me to be, even though it's contentious. I must then reach out and grab my access to women's bodies. I must then continue to work. I must then continue to have reputation, respect, and space. Henna, idle business. I just, nothing no matters. Reckless abandon. One transgresses the limits of hegemonic masculine, heteronormative masculinity in the space. And other authors in the collection talk about sexuality and relationships and race and so forth. And so we have a broader picture that this enters into. If consideration is given to the compulsory pressure of productive labor and the institution of marriage and its expectation of fidelity, which was cited by the men, as well as their very expressed embeddedness in the bounds of heteronormative, hypersexual masculinity, gender implications present as plausible. It is plausible to classify this transgression as not just a moment of self-actualization in space. It's not just about, oh my God, I'm a different kind of man, because you're still the kind of man that you are outside of that space. It is a breach of everyday rules, of appropriate behavior, which then is freeing. It is plausible to interpret such a transgression of the bounds of masculinity as they contend, they butt against expected masculine roles. The masqueraders' performative reinscription, they have recast themselves is apparent in their talk about their reasons for playing mass, their claims for freedom, signaling an awareness of limits and awareness of restriction. They claim a freedom from and a freedom to put aside the everyday. Now, the GBV part, which is what the ultimate problematic that references this, is a different argument. But in this first part about motivations and what it means for men, this is, of course, the ultimate implication. They transgress the bounds of what they see constricting them. So it's demonstrative to other men in society, these masqueraders, and they claim a space where nothing else matters, if only temporary. So let me conclude. Nothing else matters then is a phrase that suggests an all or nothing understanding of the potentials of space and play. They also then are duelling with the containment of qualified freedom. These men transgress the everyday and take advantage of the potential of the extraordinary. And with that, I say thank you for your time. Over to you, Lizzie.
Thank you, Dr. Barratt. That was excellent. It took a direction that I didn't think it was going to take. Right now, I would like to open the floor up to questions. If you have a question, you can type it in the chat box, or you can turn on your mic and ask freely. As persons decide, whether they would like to ask those burning questions. I do have a question for you, Dr. Barratt, a couple actually. I know you would have alluded to it in the beginning, but I also know a few persons came in a bit late. What motivated you to write this piece?
Sure, of course. So outside of generally wanting to understand how people participate in Carnival, and one must, I state one subjecthood. I'm a Carnival baby. I love Carnival. I've been in it since I'm 3 years old. But outside of that, as I said, there have been long reports, long public debates within literature, within academia, about women's participation in Carnival. And of course, the changing package of Carnival, the changing package of the masquerade in particular, because of the ubiquitous presence of women, i.e., we have an enhanced security, we have a different kind of packaging from what it was before women started to dominate from the 1980s. But a big part of that experience, which is enjoyment and freedom and transgression, just like the men, was that feeling of threat, insecurity of your person, insecurity of your relationships, insecurity of everything. So we wanted to understand why this present specter of gender-based violence was traveling along from masquerade to masquerade year by year. So we then decided that the best thing to do is to take the perspective of men. If the threat rests in their relationships with men, while, by the way, the security also rests in relationships with men, if we look at who the security are, the fleets of security, let us understand what men come to the road to do, to say, to feel, to experience. And then maybe we can understand how we can try to mitigate the relationship disconnect or the relational violence that may indeed be occurring.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Dr. Barratt. Again, please feel free to ask your questions. I will continue, Dr. Barratt. So essentially what I thought, or let me put it this way, in the space of men's transgression, right? That getting away from the everyday, do you think that Carnival also allows for a space of the heightening of a certain aspect of masculinity, especially when it comes to heterosexual men? Because I know you didn't really go into sexuality and stuff like that. I know other persons who wrote for the book would have addressed that. But do you think that, in that space, although they run away from responsibilities and the everyday, that sexual aspect of themselves is then heightened because you get to forget everything else?
Yes, definitely. So I would have isolated and looked at transgression within conformity
Right.
in the conformity, masculine conformity, which then is
Mhm.
heteronormative. But as just a reference and to kind of lay out what I can also consider that but didn't, is that within the framework of the carnival transgressive, you also have the opportunity for a range of non-conformity, both that which is accepted and that which is frowned upon. So remember in carnival, let's take, for example, the Juve space. We've always had this cross-dressing, whether it is they posy on your head and the nightie, or even the Dame Lorraine was originally a male, for a character played by a male masquerader. And so there was this conformity and kind of bucking the system and kind of reacting to in a more acceptable way, or a culturally acceptable way, different ways of being masculine or being non-masculine or being non-conforming, gender non-conforming. Then, as my colleagues would have explored, we do have performance of self in terms of dress, what costumes you wear, how you engage with respectability, how you engage in homoerotic behavior that may not be homosexual, how you present your homosexual self, how you form relationships, how you negotiate sexual encounters, and all of those things that occur, hypersexual and hedonistic. And within this space of the 2 days is where you then play mask, play yourself, play whatever you choose without judgment being supported. Judgment still exists, but judgment is then doesn't limit in the same way as it does in the everyday until Ash Wednesday come. And if you're Catholic, you're going to pray, God, forgive me. And if you're not, you continue and you go to Maracas Beach and try to extend the carnivalesque. But of course, we know the carnivalesque is limited to that time frame. So yes, gender and sexual non-conformity around identity, relations, behavior, desire, and expressions of that desire are very much within the space and contentious within that space.
Thank you for that, Dr. Barrett. I see a couple of questions coming in. Hugh Aberdeen asks, did the study capture the subset of men who put in the effort to become the strong man who facilitates women's transgression?
Well, we didn't, of course, go looking for this muscle men, which you might see in certain bands, some of those bands defunct. But in sampling the men on the road, we would have encountered some of those men who are appealing, who engage, who capture. As a man say, I wouldn't, when I come out here, I could pull, right? Who could pull? And so we looked at it as they would have expressed it. It's a mutual transgressiveness, which is okay, which then is fine, but we have the issue of consent. So if it is, we are mutually transgressive, I'm a hot man, I'm sexy, and I'm going to dance for another woman who I think is hot and sexy, and we have this mutual interplay of desire, then that's okay. But what happens is when men say to us, oh, I just go in and take. It don't matter if she consenting or not, I taking whatever. Similarly, if they're encountering another man, who some of my other colleagues would have talked about, who they also see as accessible because they see them as less dominant masculinity, whether it's strong or whether it's other the whole spectrum of dominance that might be embodied. Then even when it comes to other men, you do have this notion, well, I'll have access, as Ryan would have been doing in the collection. So yes, we looked at the men who could pull the gears, if I can speak it.
We have another question coming in. Do you foresee a link between the music and the transgression?
Of course. So carnival, soca music, which is fusion music, and to some degree calypso, but we focus on soca because soca is the music of the masquerade, is in itself transgressive. On the one hand, soca is social, political, and cultural commentary. We have some things like 2025, we have, think of Bungie Garland, even Marshall Montano Party, Bungie Garland, Carry It. We have, they tell stories. I can't remember all of them right now, but those are some that stand out. Soca music then comments on these things and give us these narratives for us to understand ourselves. Soca is also unifying music. If you observe over time, and I've done another study, particularly on Marshall Montano over 13 years, you have a thematic that looks at building us, putting aside the negative and just being a collective unity. Then, of course, you have the hypersexual, which is a major theme. What you want to do, how you want to do it, when you do it. It might be a narrative structure. It might be telling on somebody. It might be a call and response. It might be, well, wind up on the bumsy, kicking she back door from up in the Eastern Caribbean. And then, so you have that hypersexual element. And then you also have a kind of a testimony of one's relational desires, which unfold in the masquerade. And then we have the cultural. Okay, this is the time when I's the best singer, I's the best masquerade, I's the best everything. So yes, the music drives the transgressive of the carnivalesque. The music drives and gives you confidence to become whatever you choose to become in that space. That becoming, again, might enter into the realm of gender-based violence, which was the purpose of the whole study. But that implication is one side of it, but the other implication is kind of an expressing oneself in a way that one is not allowed to in the everyday moments.
Thank you for that, Dr. Barratt. I hope that answered your question. Let's talk about the age aspect of things, because I know you had a broad age range. Did you pick up on a theme by chance? Were the older men leaning to one side? Did they transgress in a certain way compared to the younger men, or was it consistent across the board?
Actually, no. So we had ranging from early 20s straight up until the late 50s of the 100 men. The age did not suggest so much of a difference. What was the experience in the masquerade? So how long someone was playing. So those people who were there for an extended period of time, along with the fun and the women and the freedom and stuff, their motivation that kept them there for so long was about inhabiting a character, becoming this performance on the road, freeing oneself through the mask. So they were very much more tied to the performance aspect of the masquerade. The younger men around the 20s and early 30s spoke a lot about having fun with their friends, coming out with other men, joining their brethren, their fellas, whoever, to look for the girls and to just have a blast and drink rum and just be a blast. Well, come out with my friends and sing, and I just want to have fun, and it's about freedom. And those men who were kind of in the middle, the 30s to 40s age group, who were then now married or in serious relationships, they explained themselves in two ways. I come to keep the woman company. I hear with she, or so I hear for the woman still, but my eye, she go let me look around. Or I came to participate with my partner. So I'm not just here because she said come with me, but I'm here actively participating and having fun with my wife or girlfriend, whoever. Or they come to look for women like the rest of guys. So you do have those who participate long by age, but by their motivations are connected to, I guess, their maturity stage in the masquerade, if I can say that.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Dr. Barratt. I see Tia is asking a question. Given the motivations that were explored in the presentation, did the research also capture how the interview subjects navigated rejection in their pursuit of this freedom during Carnival?
No, we did not explore that question. That's a study in itself, because you would know that around the time we were doing this study, not too long after or before, there was a declaration about the police about consent on the road and consent to wine. And we didn't enter into that conversation at the time, though it's a valid place to go into, because in later years, we also had issues that occurred in FETs where conflict broke out, fight break out, thing end up in police and court around rejection and consent. And overseas, we've had cases where women in particular were killed when they rejected somebody who was approaching them to dance. So we did not explore that at the moment, though it could have been something explored. Remember, the starting premise was around the GBV as it is experienced by women, but we isolated it for now, and that would be another stage of a study. For now, let's understand the motivations, and then in another way, we can say how you deal with rejection. Of course, that should be a more intimate conversation, because if you're on the road and you ask men how they're dealing with rejection and they're slightly drunk, they'll say, "Man, I don't." So, yeah, we'll pick it up subsequently.
Just as an aside, just as you mentioned, Carnival is a time of, wine, woman, and song.
Mm.
And you did say people were drinking. Did that affect the collection of information in any way?
So when the two gentlemen who were helping me collect data, I said, ensure you collect at the beginning of the masquerade. So on Tuesday, you meet at 6:37. Get as many people as you can get early in the day. And then as you hang around during the day, let's see after the break and then in the evening, what was interesting? The people who agreed to talk were sober enough and they had very insightful and clear. The people who were a lot more drunk, it was removed because they weren't really saying anything. They were screaming at the guys, there's only one. But I'm listening to these tapes and I said, well, okay, it doesn't give us any kind of explanation. Now it does reference the themes that their peers would have explained, but there's no evaluative force. It's just a kind of like, well, I'm there, right? So we excluded the extreme drunkies and we kept the sober responses.
Thank you for that, Dr. Barrett. I would like to open the floor if anyone else has a question before we close. Don't be shy. Dr. Barrett, before we close, I would just like to ask, did, this research change your views or your outlook on Carnival at all? Did it affect anything for you? Because I know you are a Carnival baby. You participate almost every year. And so I just wanted to know, if anything changed for you after this.
Of course, nothing changed in terms of my own motivations to participate. Thank you very much, Satira. I continue to just, when the jumbie bite, there's no escaping it, right? But what I would say is I was able to get kind of an insight into how we enter into the rejection argument, the feeling of threat, the participating in mass as a group for women, the extreme security we now have to pay for, which is carrying up the price of the end product, and the kind of like containment that a lot of people speak in popular culture as if it were about class and race only, but it's also about gender relation, the containment that is a mass band, popular mainstream mass bands, most likely because there are alternative types of mass bands. When we enter with a starting premise that I am going to take access and not negotiate access, then we have those kinds of interactions that take place that can be threatening. If then we can say your starting entry point is you can still have access because women going to access men too or other women, whatever they choose. It is about sexuality, the part. Performing sexuality is a part of Carnival for all involved. But the notion of taking and grabbing and pulling then says, okay, we have at the level of perception, even before interaction, a site where GBV then emerges. So that was insightful. And I'm not claiming that for all of the participants that violence is an intent. Absolutely not. And I don't think any of them even think of it that way. But the premise of predetermined non-consenting access is where the problematic is. So that was insightful. And thus, I practiced something that I practiced since I was a teenager. I don't dance with strangers. So nothing changed. Thank you so much. Thank you very much, everyone.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Barrett, for joining us today. This was an excellent presentation. I always like talking to you about Carnival because I come out of it like, wow, I didn't know, So thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, sharing your research. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Please look out for our upcoming lunchtime seminars in March. We do have 2 in March to look out for. I will not spoil the surprise, but please look out for the registration sign up so that we know that you will be joining us. Before I leave, I would like to say please have a safe and enjoyable carnival, whether you're on the road, on the beach, or cozied up at home. Please enjoy it and be safe. Until next time, thank you and goodbye, everyone.